fire in each eye and paper in each hand. They rave, recite, and madden round the land. Lines from Alexander Pope's quite famous work, though not as famous as The Rape of the Lock, an epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot. This is a very interesting poem, and perhaps this is the first poem through which we should get introduced ourselves to Alexander Pope. In this poem, Alexander Pope presents himself as the uncrowned monarch of the kingdom of literature, wit, and all these things, and which he of course was. Some people have critiqued it for being, a bit proud, pretentious, and all that, but I disagree. Pope really was the thing that he described himself to be. Now, in this poem, Dr. Arbuthnot was his physician. Pope, had lots of physical ailments. In fact, in the same poem, he called his life a long disease. These days, disability and all these studies are coming up in a big way. But anyway, the content of the poem is, since Pope was an influential person, a great writer, a good writer, and a popular writer, many lesser writers or poetasters, pretentious people, they often pursued him, pestered him to, so that he listens to their recitations, recommends them for publication, and all these things got on his nerves. So he let it out with this, and there are many personal enmities also, scores to be settled. However, he has not named most of them except through metaphorical or mythical names. So he says, a dire dilemma, either way I'm sped. If foes they right, if friends they read me dead. There's such a dilemma, either way I'm in danger. If foes they right, if I take enmity with them, they will write against me in newspapers. Scandalous, saying Pope is very bad, this and that. This trend continues till date, even in social media. So a dire dilemma, either way I'm sped. If foes they right, and if friends they read me dead. And if I accept them as friends, they will keep reading all their hackneyed cliches, all these poems. By the way, I personally do not like, majority of the poems that go by the name of poetry today, but not all of them are bad. But then when I read a couple of poems by some new poet or whatever, then I just keep them aside, and I'm still more comfortable with the canonical ones, though I've walked against canonicity, but anyway. So, and I'm reminded of two beautiful lines of Pope's from that poem, an epistle to, referring to one, he said, and he whose verse is so sublimely bad, it's not poetry, but prose run mad. Ha ha! That can be said about quite a few of the modern poems, contemporary poems. I mean, not all though. They're so private, their imagery, their communication, the message they want to give. It's like, in art, anything that you do not understand becomes an abstract art. So, I did some course in painting long back. So, one of my teachers was saying this, that you cannot do anything, then you claim that this is abstract, and people also buys that. So, poetry is things. So they rape, recite, and madden round the land. Now, there were hilarious things also. One person's wife eloped, and Pope says that this person was poor Connor, sees his frantic wife elope, and curses wheat, poetry, and Pope, as if Pope was responsible for all bad things happening. But in that poem, one of the most interesting character sketches is that of Addison. I think whoever has done a little bit of English literature is familiar with the name of Addison, Joseph Addison, Pope's contemporary. They are great friends, but later parted ways and they were against one another. And then Pope, he's not as harsh in case of portraying Addison as he is in the case of others. He names him Atticus, though does not name him. And then finally he repents that such a genius of a man, why he is given to all these petty matters. And if any other person would have done this, people would have laughed. But if Atticus does this, all people would weep if they knew that Atticus. Many people are publishing things against Pope. Two, three people collaborated behind his back. So all these things. So here he gives the character sketch of Atticus or Addison, which reminds me of Edward Said's, you know, uh, criticism of contemporary intellectuals in their unwillingness to take a stance against the contemporary problems, whatever, like that. So it says, willing to wound, yet afraid to strike. Pope, not Side, describing Addison, or whom he calls Atticus. Willing to wound, yet afraid to strike. Just hint a fault, and yet hesitate dislike. Alike reserved to blame or to comment. A timorous foe and a suspicious friend. It says, alike reserved, Addison, to blame or to comment. He does not blame anyone fully, does not recommend anyone fully. As an enemy, he is a weak enemy, timorous foe, timorous fear. And as a friend, he cannot trust anyone, suspicious friend. A timorous foe and a suspicious friend. Alike, just willing to wound and yet hesitate dislike. So he does not come up fully clean with what he wants to do. That is what Addison or Atticus is. And there are many other vices that he lists. And finally he says, who but must laugh if such a man there be? Who would not weep if Atticus were he? That if such a person, these things were done by any other person, ordinary person, everyone would have laughed. But if people come to know that Atticus is doing it, they will surely weep, because he has many virtues, irrespective of his faults. So the indication given by Pope in this poem is that possibly Atticus or Addison should leave his faults and then become a good man again. Now here, of course, I request you to take Pope's things with pinches of salt, or sacks of salt maybe. So Addison had his own virtues and Pope had his own lacunae, but nonetheless the portrait is superb. And though Addison may not have been a person that Pope described him as, there are many among us, all over the world, who may be like this. So they will neither blame you fully nor recommend you fully. They will be weak as enemies, and then as friends they will not rely on you, suspicious. So that is to be avoided. And that is how this new education policy and all these policies tells us how literature or anything can be useful for life. And I think this is a perfect example of Pope's character sketch, especially of Addison. So that is the thing. A dire dilemma. Either way I'm sped. If foes, they right. If friends, they read me dead. And then he says, this prints my letter. That expects a bribe. Others roar aloud. Subscribe. So I never tell you to subscribe to my channel. And those days channels were not there, but people had their own publications, journals, so they all came to, please subscribe for my journal, this and that. But thank you, Pope said, I will not, like that. So, and then he says, even in Sundays, even in church, they keep coming to him for their recommendations. So a bit exaggerated, I know, but when people become famous, celebrity, Pope was nothing less than a celebrity of that day, England of that day. So that was his fate, and which mostly resented. And along with that, those people who gave him underhand compliments or backstabbers. So he returned all this squarely in an epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot. Also in Dunciad, but here it's slightly more gentle. So I'd request you to read it, or if you have read, reread it, an epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot by Alexander Pope, published in 1734. Thank you so much. I will bring more things.